Welcome back to Weekends with Anna Kasparian and Michael Brooks. I'm Michael Brooks, along with Anna Kasparian. Guys, we're going to get to the dessert and the salt segment, but it's the first show. So there's always, actually, you're in luck. We just forgot that we're going to do another segment before we get to the dessert. So it's just a little bit of a longer show. This is sort of like the strategy segment where we look specifically at that question. That really is one of the sort of drivers and backdrops of the show. We're not interested in, making statements and points our whole lives. We want to win. And let's just, for this one, let's just kind of reflect on that Sirota interview and I'll actually just put it out real quick without starting any, I have a lot of affection for a lot of people in the Bernie campaign. I think they clearly did a lot of things right. And I think the mistakes that I perceive they made, I've been pretty public about. I think you can kind of hear there, some of the reporting has indicated that David Sirota and Nina Turner were maybe on the side of we got to go a little harder. And I think you heard that there. And I agree. And I love his use of the word ruthless. Somebody said that I use the word ruthless because I don't understand that, the left needs to be more nice or something. And I don't agree with that.
I also don't agree with that. I think that, and I hate the reflections that are like hypercritical after the fact because, obviously, anyway, look, let me just say, David Sirota especially has been criticized pretty viciously in the corporate media as the so-called attack dog. And so I knew going into this interview that he came from the same school of thought that you and I agree with, which is Bernie needed to be a little more aggressive, right? Stop referring to Joe Biden as your friend. Joe Biden is not your friend. A person who just lies to the American people with a straight face about his destructive policies is not your friend. Okay, put that aside. What I loved about what David Sirota said in that interview was this. He said, power will have to be taken. Okay, so all of these calls to be nice, that is the effort to basically like kneecap you, right? Because they know that being pleasant, that playing along with their game means that you're not going to accomplish what you want. Look, I say this every once in a while, and I don't know why I hesitate to mention it because it's absolutely true. We overthrow democratically elected leftist leaders in other countries because of the business interests in our own country. What makes anyone think that we're going to accomplish leftist policy proposals in our own country when we topple entire governments elsewhere over leftist policies? So I'm just bringing that up because there really is a fight on our hands. And I don't say that in a violent way. I say it just to show that we do need to be well organized and we do need to be aggressive. And we shouldn't be taking advice about what our rhetoric should be from the very same people that we're going to need to fight.
Yeah, and I just want to expand on that. We actually, in a segment earlier this week on TMBS, I think we used the formulation of like brutal on institutions and nice to people. Because one of the things that's also really driven me crazy is I do think that everything from, the things that we critique, whether it's like the cancel culture or the like, again, honestly, like probably Bernie going to South Carolina and using the word revolution a lot probably wasn't a good call, right? And it also, again, and this is where I will put on a mouse suit for this. It isn't even accurate. Like, it's not a revolution. It's an incredible, amazing campaign package that will hugely improve people's lives. But it is not an overthrowing of the established order. It is not like, like Bernie's going to win and then all of a sudden people are going to work in farmers collectives. Like it isn't true, right? Like it's huge for real, no bullshit change. And it's awesome, but it's not a revolution. And I think there's a lot of ways in which, in terms of our rhetoric, in terms of our cultural style, in terms of a million different things, I think that we could be infinitely more appealing and infinitely more relatable to a huge swath of people, which is totally necessary to assemble a bigger coalition to win. And then on the flip side, they're actually, and and this is like the thing that was so horrible and annoying about the Warren stuff. It wasn't just that, if everybody from out of the gate was just like, hey, we've got like an actual like labor progressive who's trying to do some new type of campaign, that's Bernie. And then we've got like your Ivy League technocrat who's a little bit more liberal. And we feel more comfortable with that because that's our thing. We're into credentials and whatever. And that's Warren. And let's have that argument. And we can argue about plans and Medium posts and whatever the hell. But it was actually like several months of people saying like, oh my God, I can't. I mean, this is my hobby horse. Or like my axe to grind. I'll say it again. Like doing like a 15-minute segment on her foreign policy and people whining about that. Right. Like not, like, yeah, at a certain point, like when the impressions kick in or whatever, sure, if you like that or you don't, whatever, I get it. But there was a very long period of time where it was just like, okay, they're competing against each other. Let's talk about the differences. That was not on the table in this very weirdly controlled, policing, neurotic way. And so I think like the polls that have emerged in like the left culture of like, on one hand, this like super intense, super controlling, like super dogmatic, like we can't rethink things we say or do at any time, which is so unappealing and so ineffective. And then actually combined with, oh, well, you can't say something about Elizabeth Warren. You can't say anything mean. We're all on the same side. Let's just trash both of those tendencies like immediately.
100%. I mean, so there were two things in this primary that really frustrated me. One you just touched on, which is this inability to frankly discuss policy differences among candidates. I mean, the whole purpose of that primary election is to pick the best candidate, the person who's best suited to represent us, the voters, but also to defeat Donald Trump, right? And so it was just fascinating to me that you would hear these calls for civility in the context of frank policy discussions and debates. That is literally what the primary election is supposed to be about. And so, my biggest issue is that you would hear that argument that you can't have these debates because it's going to help Donald Trump. You'd hear it from bad faith actors. Yep. People who aren't genuinely interested in making that point. They don't actually believe that. They don't actually think that this is helping Donald Trump. It's just their way of protecting the candidate they prefer. And I think that is, it's such an incredibly cowardly way of propping up your candidate, because what you're communicating is, my candidate has these massive flaws, and rather than be bold enough to address them or defend them, he or she has decided that they want to insulate themselves from that criticism. We saw it with Biden. We certainly saw it with Warren. And now we've ended up with a candidate. And by the way, that standard is not applied to Bernie Sanders at all. I mean, every move he makes gets criticized viciously, and that's not considered helping Donald Trump, right?
Right.
But we really need to fight back against these bad faith actors who pretend like they don't know what the primary election is for, because their actions have led us to nominating who I believe is literally the weakest candidate up against Donald Trump. That's my opinion. So
I think Warren would have been weaker. I'm not going to lie, but yes, I mean, Biden is pretty. I mean, not only is Biden weak, like just look at the immediate history. Like okay, Al Gore is the safe pick in 2000, and like actually in that context probably actually was, but like safe pick, somehow manages to lose. I mean, with the assist of the Supreme Court. John Kerry was a safe pick, lost. And we've got plenty of criticisms of President Obama, but he wasn't the safe pick in 2008. It was not the safe pick to go up against John McCain, a young senator of color with the name Barack Hussein Obama. that was there wasn't any real policy differences, but it was a risk. It was something, and we can't deny it. I think it mattered to a lot of us when we were younger. That was like a big deal, and it was a risk, and it worked well. 2016, Hillary safe, loses. I mean, not only was she not safe, I think Bernie definitely would have won 16, but again, I think Biden would have won 16. Their version of safe is sometimes the literal only person that could lose an election.
Right. And I mean, look, I think that there are two different interpretations of safe. Right. So there's safe in defeating the Republican candidate, and then there's also safe for my career trajectory. Right. And so we need to be able to distinguish between those two and differentiate between them. And that makes me think of a recent interview that Jim Messina, who worked on Obama's campaign, had with Andrea Mitchell recently, where he argued that Bernie Sanders would be an absolute disaster for the election. But you need to be able to decode that, because what he's really saying as a Democratic operative is Bernie Sanders would be a disaster for my political career. Joe Biden is someone I'm deeply connected to. I worked with him closely. So he is not a disaster for this election, because he's not a disaster for my career trajectory. We need to be able to find that and be frank about that, because I think that their messaging. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, he knows Biden, and he represents, I think Uber is one of his clients, Airbnb. So it's people I know and like representing interests that are harmful versus someone I don't know and don't like who will try to take on my clients. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.